I needed a break last weekend. Teaching all week had drained me. So, I grabbed my camera and headed to the woods near my town. The towering pines always felt soothing. I walked the familiar trails, inhaled the crisp air, and hoped that capturing some footage would help me unwind as I wandered deeper. I stumbled upon a clearing. Something caught my eye. It was a crashed drone, partially buried in underbrush. It looked old and broken, but the camera was still recording. My excitement battled with unease. I felt pulled to investigate. I picked it up. It felt surprisingly heavy in my hands. The battery was still charged. Later that night, I reviewed the footage. At first, it was just trees swaying in the wind. Then I saw a flicker of movement in the shadows. I thought I spotted a figure in the distance. My heart raced as I felt a chill spread through me. I convinced myself it was just a trick of the light. Still, something felt off. The following nights were unsettling. I heard strange noises outside my window. At first, it was just rustling like something brushing against the trees. I told myself it was probably just the wind or a deer. But when I glanced at the edge of the woods, I could have sworn I saw shadows moving. It made my skin crawl. I felt watched. I became obsessed with that footage. Each time I watched, I spotted more unsettling glimpses. The townspeople looked at me differently when I mentioned it. Their whispers grew louder, stories of people disappearing in those woods. Nobody dared to talk openly, yet I could feel their fear. It hung in the air like a thick fog. One evening, that pull grew stronger. I decided to go back to the clearing. The moon hung low, casting strange shadows across the ground. I felt both anxious and curious. What was I doing? I didn't know, but I needed to know more. When I reached the clearing, I paused. Silence wrapped around me like a blanket. My heart pounded as I scanned the darkness. Then I heard a voice, soft and haunting. "Why are you here?" I turned quickly, but nobody was around. The words hung in the air, filling the empty space. I stood frozen. My breath caught in my throat. I don't think I'll ever understand what happened that night. The silence felt alive, and I could feel a presence without seeing anything. Was it real or just my imagination? I don't know. Ever since then, I can't shake that feeling. Whatever was in those woods is still watching me, and it knows I'm trying to uncover the truth. It haunts my thoughts. I can't escape it. The next day, I decided to do some research. I wanted to learn more about that drone. Was it part of a project? Had someone gotten lost? I grabbed my laptop and headed to the library. The smell of books was familiar and comforting, a stark contrast to the anxiety clawing at me. I spent hours sifting through articles and reports about missing persons in the area. Most cases were old, but a few were recent enough to send chills down my spine. Names and faces blurred together as I flipped through the pages, but one story caught my eye. A young man named Eric had gone missing just a few weeks ago. He'd been hiking near the same woods. I copied down the details, my mind racing. Was there a connection? By the time I left the library, the sun had dipped low, and shadows spilled across the parking lot. I shoved the papers into my bag, eager to get home, but unease followed me like a dark cloud. I wondered why I hadn't heard about Eric before. The town felt so small, and yet the story hadn't reached me. Back in my apartment, I pulled out the drone footage again. I wanted to see if there were any clues. I played it on loop, my eyes straining with focus. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before on the edge of the clearing. A flicker of light. It looked like a flash from a flashlight or something reflective. I couldn't remember seeing it there when I was in the woods. My heart raced. I couldn't ignore it. I decided I had to go back. The thought of returning made my stomach twist. But if there was something hidden in the shadows, I needed to find it. I gathered my gear, extra batteries, my camera, and a flashlight. As I stepped out the door, the night air wrapped around me like a chilling promise. The walk to the clearing felt longer than ever. The woods seemed to close in around me. Each rustle made my pulse quicken. I kept expecting to hear that voice again, the one that whispered, "Why are you here?" But it was silent, too silent. When I reached the clearing, the moon was full and bright. The area felt different now. It was almost expectant. I set up my camera, aiming it at the spot where I had seen the flicker. I felt that weight in my chest again, a mix of fear and curiosity. Did I dare to wait? Minutes ticked by, and I scanned the perimeter. That S when I saw it. A figure stepped cautiously from behind a tree, just like the shadow I had glimpsed in the footage. Couldn't he breathe? Who was it? What were they doing here? The figure paused and looked my way. I could see the light reflecting off something in their hand. Fear gripped me. I stumbled backward, my foot catching on a root. I fell hard, hitting the ground with a thud. The figure froze, then turned and disappeared into the darkness. Panic raced through me. I had to get out of there. As I fumbled to my feet, something caught my eye. A glint near the spot where the figure had stood. I couldn't leave without checking. I approached, barely able to see in the dim light. That's when I found it, a small metal object, the size of a coin, engraved with strange symbols. I turned it over in my hand, my stomach dropping. What had I just uncovered? I held the small metal object tightly in my hand, my thoughts racing. The symbols twisted in my mind like a puzzle I couldn't solve. I scanned the clearing again, half expecting the figure to emerge from the trees. The stillness felt heavy, like a breath held too long. I knew I should leave, but curiosity rooted me in place that I turned the object over again, trying to make sense of it. There was no way it had anything to do with Eric, or was it? Had he been drawn here too? Suddenly, a sound broke the silence, a snap of a branch behind me. I spun around, heart pounding. Hello? I called, my voice shaky. No answer. The darkness felt deeper now, closing in like a trap. It was getting harder to breathe. I thought about turning on my flashlight but hesitated. Was it a good idea to draw attention to myself? As I stood there, frozen in fear and uncertainty, something flickered in my peripheral vision. My heart raced as I turned slowly, hoping it was nothing. But there, emerging from the tree-line, was the figure again. This time, they moved closer, their presence illuminating the edges of the clearing with the beam of a flashlight. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. The figure stepped forward, and my mind raced through possible escape routes. But all I could do was stand still. Are you looking for something? The voice was low, slightly distorted, but not aggressive. You found it. I blinked, artfully caught in confusion. Who are you? I whispered. The words barely escaped my lips. Part of me wanted to run, but another part demanded answers. I'm here to get it back, the figure said, pointing towards the small object still clutched in my hand. It doesn't belong to you. I felt fear spike through me. What do you mean? What is this? I held it out, the symbols glinting like they had their own light. The figure took a cautious step back, eyes wide. You shouldn't have picked it up. It's dangerous. Please just give it to me. A wave of dread washed over me. What had I stumbled into? Why don't you just tell me what it is? That's not how this works, they replied, almost pleading. You need to understand, others are looking for it too. If they find you, who? I interrupted, feeling a surge of adrenaline. I wanted to get away now, to run back to the safety of my apartment. But something deeper inside me craved the truth. I can't explain everything now. The figure's voice dropped to a whisper, as if the trees could eavesdrop. You need to trust me. Hand it over. Before I could reply, I heard a rustling behind me again. My breath caught in my throat. It was coming from the direction of the woods, but I couldn't see anything past the trees. I turned back to the figure, but they were already retreating into the shadows. Panic consumed me. I couldn't let them leave without answers. Wait, don't go. But it was too late. They vanished into the darkness, leaving me alone in the clearing, clutching the strange object that felt heavier than ever. Then everything went dark. I jolted awake, disoriented and gasping for air. My heart raced. The clearing was lit only by the fading moonlight. I was still clutching the object, but it felt different now, charged, almost alive. I looked around, half expecting the figure to reappear. What just happened? I muttered to myself, struggling to piece together the fragments of my memory. I had to get out of the woods. My hands shook as I fumbled for my flashlight, finally switching it on. The beam cut through the shadows, revealing nothing but trees and the underbrush. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself as I started to backtrack. The crunch of leaves under my feet sounded too loud in the quiet night. I needed to move quickly. But then, a flash of movement caught my eye. I turned sharply, pointing my flashlight that way. There, partially hidden behind a large oak, was something glinting in the light. A metallic object, similar to the one in my hand, lay half buried in the dirt. I approached cautiously, my instincts screaming at me to keep moving. It felt wrong, but curiosity pulled me closer. I knelt down, brushing away the debris. It was a small drone. The shiny body was scratched up, and the camera lens was cracked. Adrenaline surged through me as I wondered how it had ended up here. I could see an SD card slot, and an idea sparked in my mind. If I recovered the footage, I might uncover anything that could explain this bizarre situation. I pulled my phone from my pocket and took a picture of the drone. My fingers were numb as I felt around its body, hoping to find the memory card. Just then, a low growl emanated from the darkness behind me. My stomach dropped. Couldn't it just be the wind? I turned, flashlight shaking in my grip, to find a pair of glowing eyes staring back at me. A large wolf, or maybe something larger, watched from the tree line. Panic surged again as I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding. "Stay back," I yelled, even though my voice trembled. There was no way I could outrun it. I needed to face whatever it was, so I slowly moved towards it, waving my flashlight like a shield. But just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature vanished, melting into the shadows of the trees. I was left standing there, breathless. I felt the weight of the drone against my leg, a reminder of my original mission. I had to get home now. I took one last look at the spot where the drone had been, clutching my object tightly. That's when I felt it, a vibrating hum, low but insistent, emanating from the thing in my hand. Before I could process what it meant, the forest erupted with a sudden cacophony of rustling and growls. I could hear movement all around me, a chorus of ominous noises closing in from the darkness. The time for questions was gone. I turned and ran into the night. I sprinted through the underbrush, my flashlight beam flickering wildly as I dodged branches and roots. The sounds of the forest felt amplified, each snap and rustle echoing in my ears. I had no idea what I was running from, but I could feel it pursuing me. The ground sloped downward, and I stumbled, nearly losing my balance. I caught myself against a tree, the bark rough against my palm. Sweat dripped down my face, and my breath came in desperate gasps. I had to keep moving. There was no time to think, only to survive. Just as I regained my footing, the low growl returned, closer this time. Panic clenched my stomach as I pushed forward. The path ahead was narrowing, transforming into a tangled mess of thorns and brush. I had to break through. I had to find a way out. That's when I saw it, an old hunting cabin, barely visible through the thicket. Seemed abandoned, but it was my only option. I darted toward it, pushing the door open with a reluctant shove. The hinges creaked loudly, and I flinched at the sound. Inside, darkness enveloped me, and I quickly closed the door behind me, breathing heavily. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of wood rot. I scanned the room, my flashlight darting over dusty furniture and cobwebs. I needed a moment to collect myself. But the gnawing sensation of being watched gnawed at my resolve. That I in the far corner. Something caught my eye. A workbench laden with rusted tools and old supplies lay beneath a grimy window. I crept toward it, hoping to find something useful. That's when I noticed a small metal box, locked but battered. Besides it sat a power source that looked like it could charge the drone. Something deep inside me urged caution, but I couldn't ignore the possibility of more answers. Suddenly, the door rattled. I froze, heart racing at the sound. Whoever or whatever was out there was determined to get in. I felt the hum from the object in my pocket intensify, as if it sensed the imminent danger. I pulled it out, uncertain of what it might reveal, but hoping it held some sort of power. The door shook again, and I noticed a glimmer behind me. The window. I turned just in time to see a shadow pass by. I caught my breath, trying not to scream. My instinct screamed for me to grab the power source and bolt. But I took a deep breath that I rushed to the workbench, grasping the box. It was time to confront whatever was outside, to find out what secrets this place held. I didn't want to end up like the drone, some forgotten relic of a strange encounter. With trembling hands, I began to scour the box, my mind racing. What if I found something that could help, or worse, something that would unleash a greater terror? But curiosity outweighed my fear as I pried the lid open. The door slammed against the wall, followed by a terrifying growl that made my blood run cold. I turned, heart pounding, ready to face whatever was lurking just outside. I swung around, my breath hitching in my throat. The door hung ajar, the splintered wood around the frame giving away how forcefully it had been kicked. The dark shape outside was unmistakably there. It paused just beyond the threshold, its silhouette a mass of shadows shifting against the dim forest light. I gripped the metal box tightly, my fingers slipping against the rust. I could hear the creature's breath, heavy and labored. Was this a beast or something worse? I took a second to consider my choices. I could bolt for the window, but that would mean exposing myself even more. The cabin was a flimsy refuge, but it was all I had. The growl echoed again, low and rumbling, echoing through the cabin. My instincts screamed for me to hide, but I fought the urge. I couldn't let fear dictate my next move. It was pivotal to understand what I was up against. I directed my flashlight toward the door, illuminating the space around it. Nothing, but I could still sense it out there, lurking just within reach. I needed a distraction. Quickly, I placed the metal box on the workbench, struck by an idea. If I could trigger something, perhaps I could confuse it long enough to escape. I fumbled in my pocket for the power source, my mind racing as I plugged it into the drone component. I noticed the box creaking open slightly. It was a weak latch, easily nudged by a frantic hand. My heart thudded as I carefully lifted the lid. Inside, there were strange fragments, old wires, a cracked lens, and something that looked like a small circuit board. Each item felt steeped in mystery. Then I heard a thud from outside, loud and jarring. It shook the cabin walls and sent shards of dust cascading from the ceiling. I quickly turned to the door, dread pooling in my stomach. The creature was testing the boundaries. I needed more time. In a moment of reckless desperation, I reached into the box further, searching blindly. My fingers brushed against something cooler and solid, and I pulled it out. It was a circular device, metallic and foreign. With barely any time to think, I pressed a button on its surface. Instinct took over. The power source began to whir. A hum filled the room, vibrating through my bones. Light emitted from the circular device, cutting through the shadows like a beacon. The moment the light hit the doorway, I felt a shift. The growling stopped abruptly as the creature recoiled, as if stung by the illumination. But then, the light flickered. The circuit board sparked in my hands, and panic seized me. I shuffled backward to the far corner of the room, adrenaline pumping. I barely had time to react when something smashed against the door with a bone-rattling impact. This wasn't just a stumble. It felt calculated. The creature knew I was here, and it wanted in as the door threatened to surrender to the relentless force outside. I wondered if I had unleashed more than I could handle. My heart sank as the impending dread wrapped around me like a shroud. My mind raced. I had to find a way out, to get back to safety, but I couldn't let that thing get to me first. I took a deep breath. I needed to make a plan, fast. Then the power source in my hand shuddered violently, and through the chaos, I could have sworn I saw a face behind the door, splintered with a glimpse of something horrific and familiar. My heart raced as the door shuddered violently under another assault. The weight of the darkness outside pressed in, and I felt trapped, suffocated by the fear that tightened around my chest. I needed to think. The circular device in my hands flickered again, its light dancing across the walls, and I forced myself to focus. I scrambled to make sense of what I had discovered in the metal box. The circuit board had pulsed with energy before it sputtered out. I needed to find a way to restore it. As I glanced around the cabin, an idea sparked. There had to be something I could use to amplify the light or create a diversion. With no time to waste, I set the device on the workbench and rushed over to the cabinets lining the far wall. I tore through my surroundings, flinging open drawers and tossing aside useless items, rusty tools, empty jars, and old rags. A part of me half expected one of those objects to jump out at me, growling like the creature outside. Then, in the shadows of the bottom drawer, I spotted a bright orange flare. My breath quickened with relief. It wasn't much, but it could keep the thing at bay long enough for me to figure out a next step. I snatched the flare and clutched it tightly, recalling the way it illuminated the forest when lit. Another crash from the door nearly sent me tumbling back into the wall. Panic surged through my veins. I ripped the cap off the flare and struck it against the side of the drawer. The sudden burst of spark caught the edge of my vision, and I felt a surge of hope as the flame ignited with a dramatic whoosh. I quickly positioned the lit flare in the gap between the door and the frame, directing its glow towards the dark mass just beyond. The creature recoiled again, but this time, it emitted a shriek, a sound that was more human than animal. My skin crawled, and I took an involuntary step back, confusion flooding my mind that I needed more time. I turned my attention back to the circular device. I fumbled with the wires, hoping to find a way to connect them, but the surge of my panic made steady hands difficult. Just then, the cabin shook as the creature banged against the door again. I clutched the workbench to steady myself, and I grunted in frustration. When I caught a glimpse of something on the floor beneath the workbench. It was a small hatch leading down to the cellar, barely visible in the dim light. My heartbeat quickened again, but this time it wasn't just fear, it was the flicker of a possible escape route. I had no choice. I kicked aside the debris and dashed to the hatch, heart pounding in my throat. I knew the creature was still lurking just out of sight, and I could feel it waiting for the moment I slipped up. With a shaky hand, I reached for the handle and pulled. The hatch creaked open, revealing a dark, unknown space below. Then I heard it again, the creaking of wood, the sound of claws scraping. I glanced back, catching the sight of a shadow shifting at the threshold. Whatever it was closer now. I couldn't waste another second. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and dropped into the cellar, pulling the hatch closed behind me. Darkness enveloped me the moment I landed, and I was left gasping for breath. I couldn't see anything, but the sound of my own heartbeat rang in my ears, blending with the distant growls of the creature above. But as I huddled in the cool earth below, I realized I was not alone. Something else was down here with me. I blinked in the darkness, my heart racing. There was definitely something moving near me. I strained my ears, hoping to catch any distinct sound that could give me a clue about what was lurking in the shadows. The faint rustle echoed in the confined space, sending a shiver down my spine. The cellar was cramped, felt damp, the earth cold against my palm. I needed to move quietly. Whatever was down here might not know I was here yet, but that could change in an instant. I slowly shifted to my left, feeling my way along the damp, rough wall. Just then, I heard a low, rumbling sound. It wasn't like the creature outside. This noise felt more mechanical, as if something was malfunctioning. I froze, caught between the visceral urge to flee and the curiosity that held me in place. When my fingers brushed against something solid and metallic. I whipped around, holding my breath. My hands explored the surface, and I realized it was some sort of device. My heart leaped. Was it a tool? Something I could use? Or was it another piece of the twisted puzzle? I retrieved what felt like a broken drone, its propellers caked with dirt. Memories flashed in my mind of the drone I had seen a few days ago while passing through the woods. I had left it there, watching it bombard the treetops in vain. But what had happened to it? Why was it down here? I paused. I had seen what happened when I activated the circular device, but I hadn't examined this drone closely while it was in use. I needed to check for any operational parts. I felt around for the battery compartment, praying it wasn't completely destroyed. My fingers found a latch, and I pried it open. The battery was still intact despite the grime. I felt a spark of hope. Maybe I could get this to work again. If I could just get it to power on, maybe I could use it to distract the creature outside or even illuminate the dark corners of this cellar. But before I could gather my thoughts, the ground trembled again. My body tensed as I heard the unmistakable echo of claws scraping against the hatch above. The creature was still out there and was now agitated, probably sensing my absence. I quickly worked to remove the battery and assess the drone's wiring. If I could power it with the circuit board from the device, maybe I could set it flying, even for just a few seconds. I felt the urgency creep into my veins again. Time was running out. Suddenly, I heard a strange voice, a whisper, so faint I could barely make it out. Help! It was a word in the darkness, chilling and almost pleading. My breath caught in my throat as my heart raced once more, but it wasn't coming from the hatch. The voice seemed to come from somewhere deeper within the cellar. I glanced around, trying to locate the source of that sound. Help! It came again, more distinct this time, echoing within the walls of the cellar. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I felt drawn toward the voice. What had I stumbled into down here? I hesitated, torn between the lure of the unknown and the imminent threat above. Then everything went dark. The small light I had been using to examine the drone flickered out, leaving me alone with the whisper and the descent of imminent danger above. I felt the weight of the darkness pressing in on me. Panic surged again, and I fumbled for my pocket, searching for my lighter. The gentle click of it igniting broke the silence, but the weak flame did little to push back the shadows. I held it up, squinting as the flickering light danced in the cellar's corners. Help! The whisper echoed, closer now. I turned in its direction, my breath shallow and uneven. Was I losing my mind? I focused on where I believed the voice originated. It came from the farthest corner of the cellar. I took a cautious step forward, the ground shifting beneath me as I maneuvered around the debris that littered the space. As I approached, the whispering intensified. Help me! My heart raced. There was a desperation in that voice, one that felt all too real. But for every step I took closer, dread crawled up my spine. What kind of help could I offer? Was someone trapped down here? I reached the wall, running my hands along its damp surface. The whisper faded momentarily, replaced by the faint jingle of metal. I crouched low, straining to see through the shadows. When I spotted something glinting, a piece of broken machinery. That glint pushed me further. I reached out, feeling around until my fingers brushed against what seemed like a hand. A cold rush of reality hit me. There was definitely a presence here with me. Trembling, I grasped what I had found, pulling into the light of my lighter. It was a small metallic arm, just like the one I had seen on the drone, but this one was attached to something much heavier, something more ominous. I inhaled sharply. There was a body, or at least I thought there was. Are you there? I called out, my voice trembling. Help! Came the reply again, but this time it felt like it surged through the bones of the thing on the ground. Just as I realized this was more than a mechanical device, this was something alive. Something trapped. My lighter flickered again. The flame flared, illuminating a figure that had been hidden in the ground. A face, gaunt and shadowed, eyes wide with terror, stared back at me. I stumbled backward, my heart threatening to leap from my chest. This was no ordinary situation. Whatever lay before me didn't belong to the same reality I had known. But before I could take flight, the ground shook again, and I heard the claws above scratching more frantically. The creature was still out there, and now it seemed closer than ever. When it hit me, my lighter, this figure, the drone, was everything connected? The whispers, the urgency of the moment drove me to action. I hadn't come down here just to stand frozen. With a quick motion, I reached for the drone. There was still a chance. If I could revive it, maybe I could create a distraction and free whoever was trapped here. But as I got ready to sprint back to where I'd found the drone, I heard another voice, this one deeper and far more menacing. You shouldn't have come here. The weight of realization crashed over me. I was not alone. The shadows deepened, closing in around me as I faced the unknown threat. I had stumbled into something far worse than I had imagined, and I could feel the darkness closing in, tightening its grip around my throat. The drone lay on the floor beside me, pulsing with an urgency I had not witnessed before. I barely had time to consider what to do when the distant scraping above grew louder, more relentless. The creature was attempting to break through, and I knew I had to act fast. I grabbed the drone, my hands shaking as adrenaline coursed through my veins. I knew the urgency wasn't just for me. There was a life beneath the dirt, and I felt a fierce responsibility to help whoever was trapped. But the reality of what I was facing pressed in on me with a weight that was unforgiving that I hurried to reconnect the battery, my fingers frantic. The low rumble of the creature above reminded me that time was slipping away. I glanced at the glint of the figure's eyes in the shadow, a horrific reminder of my precarious situation. Help, the whisper came again, but I could not respond. I needed focus. I envisioned what a drone could do. It could fly, distract, illuminate. If I could get it operational, it might create a window for me to escape, perhaps even for the figure below. That I fought the impulse to look further down into the void of darkness, clutching the drone as I fumbled with the components. Somehow, I managed to set up a connection with the circular device. There was warmth building from within it, a flicker of hope rising amidst the terror that I word to life, and I couldn't help but let slip a small sigh of relief. The sound was promising. I carefully held it above the darkness, illuminating the cellar with its bright beam. For a moment, the shadows were pushed back, and my heart raced not just from fear, but from the power of possibility. Hold on, I murmured, more to myself than to the other presence in the darkness. I activated the drone, and it sputtered for a moment before lifting a few inches off the ground. I steered it cautiously toward the hatch, hoping its light would disorient the creature above, giving me a chance to escape. Just as it hovered near the entrance, the sound of claws dangerously scraped into the cellar. The drone advanced, shining bright with the intensity that held the darkness at bay. In that instant, I felt buoyed by the connection I was forging with my strange surroundings. Now I breathed, pushing the drone further toward the center of the room, a final desperate act to create a distraction. Just then, the whispers intensified. Help! Help! It was the figure below urging me. The voice pulled at me, beckoning me deeper into its mystery. Stay there. I'm coming. But the fear clawed at my consciousness. Could I truly save whoever was down here if I was in danger myself? Then came a loud, earth-shattering crash from above as the creature finally burst through the hatch, sending a flurry of dust and splintered wood everywhere. Heart racing, I yanked the drone back, shoving it closer toward the wall. The beam flickered ominously as I lost control. The creature loomed in the opening, its eyes reflecting the harsh light in an unnerving manner. I felt paralyzed for a split second until the drone appeared to regain its stability. It began buzzing toward the creature, the light emanating fiercely, throwing the shadows back even further. Go! I shouted, desperation overpowering any fear. The drone darted toward the creature, and momentarily, it hesitated, monstrous form casting a shadow across the way. I saw my chance. Help! The voice behind me was anguished, and I turned to see the gaunt face still staring, desperation pouring from those wide eyes. Please, you can help me. You have to. But there was no time. I made a split-second decision, ignoring the compelling need to save both the figure and my own life. I bolted toward the hatch, feeling the weight of both terror and urgency. The creature, distracted by the drone's illumination, shifted its focus, moving to follow the flying object as I threw myself against the hatch. Scrambling back outside, I heard the whispers again. Help! But this time, they were fading, swallowed by the cargo of darkness creeping in around the hatch. I couldn't look back. I had to run. Branches snagged at me as I tore through the underbrush, desperate for distance. My heart thudded heavily in my chest, echoing like a drum of uncertainty. I burst from the trees into the open light, collapsing against the grass, gasping for breath. When the weight of the woods fell behind me, I managed to crawl to my knees, glancing back. Things were dark again. I had lost sight of the cabin and the figure. The truth settling in made a chill run through me. Did I leave them behind? Had I really escaped, or had I traded one form of captivity for another? The drone's whirring faded, and I swiped at the tears forming in my eyes, unsure of what I had witnessed. Although I had escaped the immediate danger, a lie nestled in my heart, a lingering unease that something remained unfinished. I stared at the woods, heart heavy with questions. I moved away and drove back toward home. Days later, I still couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't over. That part of me still dwelled in the shadows of that night, forever entwined with things beyond my understanding. Sometimes, I wonder about the voice, about the figure beneath the earth. I question if the woods hold secrets deeper than I could ever reveal or comprehend. But those woods, they become a closed chapter, a guarded space that now seems to pulsate with dark energy, an echo of what I once dared to uncover.